All right, so welcome again. And we are here today to talk about the Tax Analyst Public Service Fellowship, which is a partnership between, as you might guess, tax analysts who generously funds the salary and benefits and travel and all of that, and the tax section. And so our role here at the tax section is to partner with tax analysts and use their generous funding to administer the program, essentially. So in that capacity, Tony, Karen, Ty, and I are here today to talk through sort of the goals of the fellowship, and then answer any questions that you might have. And we'll also talk a bit about sort of like logistics and selection and matching and all of that. So just real quick, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on the fellowship. And at some point when I'm not speaking, because I don't multitask well, I will drop into the chat the link to the page on our website about the fellowship in case you haven't seen it. Probably you have if you made it to this info session. And then also the application. Now the application contains probably the most detailed information about the fellowship. So if you're looking to answer questions that we missed today, that may be a good first place to start because there's a lot in there. But so we are right now in the recruitment phase for a fellow that would begin in the fall of 2023 and complete the fellowship in the fall of 2025. This will be our second tax analyst fellow. The first fellow is serving a 2022 to 2024 term. And just in case you hear, you know it all about it, we used a slightly different approach with the first fellow where we had selected the host organization in advance and recruited a fellow to go there. We've changed that, and we always intended to change that. It was always the intention to use a different strategy thereafter. And as such, for the current fellow that we're seeking, we expect that applicants, so potential fellows, would locate a host organization in advance of completing the application, and that both parties would agree that they would be good working, that they would have a solid working relationship, and both parties have a clear understanding of what role the fellow would play and how having a fellow would in some way enhance the work that's happening already at the host organization. And just by way of background, the purpose of this fellowship was so the tax section has a existing fellowship that we've had for many years now, over a decade, called the Christine Brunswick Public Service Fellowship. You can find information about that one on our website as well, and we can also drop the link here because I think there's a couple of you that might be as interested or more interested in that fellowship as well. And it's been very successful over the course of the time that we've been doing it. Many of the fellows that have participated in that program have gone on after the fellowship to work at their host organizations or work in other places in government or public service, LATCs, things like that. That program is for recent graduates of JD or an LLM program, or recent tax clerks. Recent being, just graduated or maybe a year or two out, and it's really tailored and targeted to that group of people. And so for that fellowship, we look for organizations that are able to support and train a very new lawyer, someone who is not only new to tax law, but is new to law in general, usually. And for this fellowship, we were looking for people who maybe have been practicing tax law for a few years. So someone who could practice independently, maybe doesn't require the same level of supervision and training as a new lawyer would. And that gives us a little more flexibility in the organizational hosts. We feel that this fellowship enables the tax section and tax analysts to place fellows in host organizations that might be very understaffed and not have the capacity to train a new lawyer, but would very much welcome someone to come in and help with the client load or help with expanding the reach of the organization in new parts of in new regions of the area. While we don't have a specific set of criteria for the host organization, we are prioritizing areas with minimal, that don't have a lot of LITC coverage, areas that don't have a lot of pro bono coverage, which is usually more remote or rural areas, or areas that are just underserved by the tax bar generally. But then also open to other compelling reasons that why this fellowship is needed, perhaps to reach a group of people that are just being underserved in an area where there are LITCs, but there's a specific need for additional assistance, to a certain group of people or something like that. All of this should be outlined in the application. There are essays involved in the application process. So if you are applying for, if the application is coming from somewhere that does have a good coverage of LITCs, or is in sort of like a major city, it would be good to cover why you think that this particular host organization and this particular fellow has a plan for reaching people that wouldn't otherwise be able to have tax assistance, because the goal is really to expand representation and assistance to populations that right now really don't have that opportunity, or are not getting it. As such, our first fellow is currently based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I believe there's one LITC that serves the whole state of New Mexico. And so you can see that as a good example of what we're looking for here. A place where you've got two attorneys, two LITC attorneys for the state of New Mexico. And so now we have three. So that's just an example of, a placement that sort of fits with the ethos and purpose of the fellowship itself. So that's a little bit of the background on the fellowship. Again, it's a 2-year fellowship. You can find the salary information in the application, or stipend information in the application, but it's in the vicinity of $80,000. And then we also pay for, and Ty can get into this later, but we also pay for various benefits. I won't get into them because Ty will do a better job. And that's separate from the stipend, so not included in the stipend. And by we, I mean tax analysts. Sorry, I shouldn't take credit for that. And let's see, was there anything else on my list? I'll save the timeline and the selection, or the timeline, for the end, just because it feels like a good closing activity, and sort of how that whole process will work. But yeah, and I see a question just came in from Janice that's good to cover. Yes, it'll be one fellow for 2023 to 2025. For the Christine Brunswick Fellowship, we frequently and usually fund 2 per class, if you will. Right now, the Tax Analyst Fellowship is 1 per class, as it's a new opportunity, and we're piloting it still, I would say. So yes, 1 fellow. The selection committee will select 1 fellow from the pool of applicants. And again, the folks that are selecting, the folks that will be selecting, they'll be reviewing applications and selecting the fellow, are a subset of our public service fellowship selection committee. That group has been selected from among the tax section base, people who have understanding of how LITCs work, how pro bono tax law works, and have been active in this section in that way. And they select the Christine Brunswick Fellowship through a pretty tried and true process that we are, always tweaking a little bit. But so we'll use a similar process here, just with a slightly smaller group out of the larger PSF selection group. So it is sort of like a group interview thing. But we're not scary. We're all very kind, nice people. And we do try to get, even if for folks who aren't selected, we do try to figure out ways to get people involved in other aspects of this section. And we have selected people for future years that maybe didn't get selected for prior year. For Christine Brunswick, I imagine that's possible here as well. So we try to be as inclusive as we can. All right, Tony, did you want to talk a little bit about the expectations and sort of experience of the fellow?
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the fellows. And so the first thing that I was asked to talk about is what you should consider when you're pulling the application together. And one thing, right away to consider is that, part of the change in process, as Meg had said, to make it more like the way we do our Christine Brunswick Fellowship, is that you have to be paired up with the host organization before you apply. So you have to find an organization that you are going to be working, that you would like to work with, and that would like to work with you, and put the application together built around that. And you should really keep, I think, kind of the audience of the people who will be reviewing the applications in mind, kind of what are they looking for? Because I'm among the group, as is Meg and Karen. I mean, we're all in the group of people that are going to be reviewing the applications, and the kinds of things that, we're looking for, to find out why, especially since we're talking about people who are, seasoned attorneys, at least have some experience in tax, why are you thinking about making the move into public interest work? What is it that's bringing you to doing this? Is this, are you thinking of this as a permanent shift, as kind of a stepping stone into doing public interest work permanently? We've also thought about this as the possibility of being your stepping stone, not to something permanent, but perhaps maybe to retirement. Sometimes people wish to kind of transition out of practice, but don't want to completely give up practicing, but would like to help people out. And so, they view this as, I'll be working for a while, probably more than just the 2 years of the fellowship, doing public interest work, but then we'll eventually retire. So there's different ways of thinking about it. You don't have to be a fellow who's at near the beginning of your career or in the middle of your career. You could also be the end of your career. So it's basically, it could be any time, as long as you have some experience in tax. And as Meg said, the focus is on trying to get people who don't need as much supervision as our Brunswick fellows do, people who can act independently. Something else to think about is to have already talked with the organization, hopefully a lot, about what you would be doing, how you would be doing it, how you'd fit into the organization, what kind of supports they have for you, not in terms of kind of hand-holding supports like you would want for someone who's just out of law school, but in terms of support so that you can get your work done. Will you have an office? Where will your office be? Is it going to be close to the, other people you're going to be working with, or to the clients? Things like that to help us think through, whether or not this will be a successful fellowship, because that's often what we're really worried about and concerned about is, we want this money to help people. And the only way it's going to help people is if the fellow is successful. So we're always looking at ways of making sure that you're going to be getting what you need to make sure that happens, and that there aren't going to be any issues or, problems in, kind of the day-to-day doing of the work. And knowing that you've also thought about and talked with the organization about how you're going to fit in within the organization, because presumably there'll be other, LITC attorneys there or tax attorneys there, or even other non-tax attorneys there that you might need to be working with. And what is your role vis-a-vis them? How will you be working together? Does it look like it will be a good fit? All of those kinds of things are helpful for us to know.
Tony, can I interject something
sure,
as you're talking that occurs to me? And that is, I literally have been in this position or a position like this with the fellowships for probably a dozen years now. And I think the recipe for success that I have seen with the Brunswick Fellows, because we have more experience with that, is that the people who come in with their applications, yes, you've correctly noted, they have to identify their sponsoring organizations, but in most instances, they have been already working with their sponsoring organizations for some period of time, 6 months, a year, whatever, so that they have developed not just a understanding of how the clinic or our clinic works or wherever they're going, but they have relationships developed, which kind of puts people in a different position in wanting to succeed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's particularly for the Brunswick Fellowship. I think that's terribly important. If you're on this call saying, I'm interested in coming in to do public service now, and you haven't volunteered for your local LITC or some other pro bono organization in your community, I don't think you're ready. And that would be one of the ways to get yourself ready, is to sign up to become a referral attorney or go in a couple of days a week and help the people who are there with your expertise, so that you've you've got that relationship. So you and the organization can come forward in a collaborative effort to apply for your fellowship.
I think, real quick, I think that's a good point. And if there are folks that are located in places like Wyoming, where there aren't a lot of LITCs around, you can contact me and I'm happy to put you in touch with ways of doing remote assistance or connecting with resources that are available for volunteering.
Yeah, because I was going to give, a plug to the Center for Taxpayer Rights with their LITC Connect. You can go on their webpage, sign up there, and they're kind of plugged into the community of LITCs that need help. So that way people can volunteer for organizations that aren't even in their region, which kind of leads me to kind of the next thing that I was asked to, not the next, but the last thing, but I'll talk about that first. I'll flip the stuff that's on my list to talk about, which is how you can look for a host organization. And if you're, connecting with an organization, say outside of your area through LITC Connect or something like that, that might be one way of identifying a host organization who has needs and that you've now developed a relationship with, is by doing that kind of volunteering. Another good way to find a host organization is to come to these calls, because that was part of the reason why, I thought it was great for Meg to have everyone go around and kind of talk about, just before we started recording, who you are, where you work and what you're interested in the call is, because we found when we've done these calls in the past for the Brunswick Fellowship that it helps to identify organizations that have a need. And then that can, help either people on the call, or if you're, listening to the recording, reach out to Meg, to find out who it is that has expressed a direct interest in, we need a fellow, we want a fellow, we'd like to host a fellow. And then in that way, we can help connect people together who are interested in working, and people who are looking for a fellow. And then, even if it's not someone on the call, Meg is still a fabulous resource for this, because sometimes she gets independent outreach from organizations, organizations that don't necessarily participate in the information session or come to listen, but that express an interest otherwise, that, like, we'd be really interested in having a fellow, or that we've learned about over time, say through the Brunswick Fellowship application process. So we'll have some knowledge. Another good way, I would say, of, finding an organization would be to sign up for our LITC listserv that we have with the tax section. You don't have to be, it would be great if you join the tax section and join the listserv, but you don't have to be a tax section member to join that specific listserv. And so you can get on there and you can start seeing, because that is our absolutely most robust listserv in the tax section. It's used constantly. LITC attorneys are always, posting questions, problems, to get feedback from other LITC attorneys, posting, openings that they have. And you could certainly also post that you're someone who's interested in doing a fellowship and would like to find an organization. And is there an organization that has particular need that you might be able to help and talk with more? So that could be another way of finding an organization. And then the last thing I was asked to talk about is how this can help your career. And this kind of links back to what I started talking about, which is if you're, kind of interested in making the move into pro bono work for whatever reason, if it's, kind of earlier in your career and this is what you think you really want to do for the rest of your career, if you're mid-career and you want to, move in that same way, or if you're at the end of your career and, kind of wanting to shift into pro bono, this fellowship can potentially be a great stepping stone into doing that. A lot of our experience with the Brunswick Fellows is that, it can serve as a stepping stone either to doing tax pro bono work at another organization, or oftentimes at the organization that they get placed with as a fellow, because the organization realizes that, they add value, they do great work, and then they find other funding to make sure that they can stay on. So, this can be a great way to kind of, get your foot in the door and show that, you have the interest, you have the capacity, and that you can really add value, and then hopefully turn it into something longer term than just 2 years. So that was all that I had to say. So I will turn it over to Karen, who is supposed to go next and talk about potential host organizations and provide some information for them.
Yeah, I think for the most part, a lot of what Tony says applies in the other direction to host organizations. If you're looking for somebody, a good thing to do is show up for these calls and let people know particularly let the ABA people know that you have a need, so that if something comes across their desk, they'll keep you in mind. I do think if you want to be a host organization, and you have minimal resources in your own community, then reaching out to Meg and finding out, or going to the other LITC helping areas, is a place to find out what's going on. Stay plugged in to what the community is doing. I think I just saw a job announcement come across my portals two or 3 days ago for an LITC position. So you never know when they're going to pop up like that. And that's how you need to do it. You need to make people aware. And the people who are interested enough to be on this call, or interested enough to be members of the LITC pro bono chat group, are the ones who are paying attention to what's going on. So the communication is always there. But I would also say, if you're looking for someone and you don't know quite how to do that, again, Meg might be able to help you with that outreach process. How do you find, if you are in a less populated state where there aren't a lot of tax lawyers, how do you reach out? I think Meg is a good resource for you in terms of how to do that, to get your name in front of people, let people know that you're a program that's interested in some additional help. The other thing, aside from kind of getting somebody for yourself, the other thing that I think sponsoring organizations for the Tax Analyst Fellowship need to understand that we want this to be a position for a transitioning person who is more seasoned and experienced in their practice. So I think that's a boon if you've got a small LITC and you're needing some help from somebody who can hit the ground running. That's what we're trying to provide with Tax Analyst Fellowship. We want somebody who knows how to practice, somebody who is a tax lawyer, somebody that an organization doesn't have to expend a tremendous amount of resources training on the substantive areas of what they're going to work on, the procedural and how it happens in that particular LITC. It's always obviously a learning process, but we don't expect that there be the need for so much supervision. Pardon me, I've got early morning fog voice from where I am. But so you need to think about that fit. You're not, and some of you I listened to, I guess Arkansas sort of caught my ear in particular, where you really want somebody who's really practiced, who knows what they're doing, so that you don't have to spend a lot of energy. You can send them out on their own. Colorado, the same thing. You can send them out unsupervised relatively quickly, so that they can hit the ground running and do the work for you and help the program. So I think you need to. It's a different kind of thought process than if you're hiring somebody brand new out of law school, that you're going to have to expend a lot of time and energy and effort, both training and supervising, as to law and practice. So for me, it's a different mentality. But the outreach itself is identical. It just addresses a different audience. Some of that audience is obviously on the phone or the call here today. I don't know, Meg, do you share the information on people, or if they ask you, do you share on this call who might want to be hooked up with somebody? I mean, I heard a couple of Colorados, for instance, that didn't know about one another that could hook up.
Yep, I'm happy to do that, make those connections. Yep.
Yeah. I wasn't also sure about Wyoming and whether she was close enough to Colorado that she was ready to consider that small move in order to help Colorado out. But these are the ways that we figure out the connections to put you together with one another. And so you have to speak up, because we don't we don't know unless you tell us. And the best way to tell us is through Meg, because she's sort of our clearinghouse. So I don't know what else to say about how to do it. You're obviously, those of you who are on the call who already have clinics have already been trying to staff yourselves. And so you know what you've tried that has worked, and you know what you've tried that hasn't worked. So this is another methodology that we're offering you to try it out and see if it works. I guess with respect to the Brunswick Fellow, I just want to point out, this is a pilot project. Tax Analysts has committed to us for 2 fellowships. So we did one last year, which will run through next year, and this will be our second one. The success of whether Tax Analysts continues with us and continues to make their contribution to make this program possible very much hinges on how these 2 fellowships go. There's going to be an analysis and an evaluation at the end of this, and Tax Analysts will decide whether it's money well spent. I'm in a position to kind of tell them I think it's money well spent even now, but they're still going to make that decision on their own. But it is, for the time being, you're guinea pigs in a sense. So for those of you on the call who are interested in that, you are going to be a little bit under the microscope, because we are watching this program more closely. The Brunswick Fellowship kind of runs on its own once we pair people up. But this one's a bit more under the microscope. It's a little more hands-on from the ABA, because we want it to succeed. We want you to succeed, whether you're a host organization or you were the person coming in as the volunteer. We want this to work. So we're working more closely with it, and we're much more involved and willing to stay involved in order to get you through the beginning parts of the process. I don't know if I have anything else to say. All talked out.
Great.
So is
Meg,
it Ty's turn to talk about the economics of things?
I'll talk nuts and bolts, folks. And so, more into the nitty gritty. So once the sponsoring organization and fellow have been paired and are awarded the fellowship, the fellow is employed by the sponsoring organization. They're the one that handles all that type of paperwork, onboarding, HR. They're the one that is going to be on the W-2 for the employee, for the fellow. What the section and the Tax Analysts Fellowship sponsors is a direct contribution to the sponsoring organization. It's done quarterly. I'll admit the first payment is always a little slow. It takes an extra 2 or 3 weeks. So let's pretend the fellow starts on September 1st. Our first contribution often doesn't come until mid-September, just because of the paperwork. What the ABA requires is some forms to be filled out by the sponsoring organization. And then once that process has been solidified after that first contribution, they're pretty clockwork. You don't need to resubmit or anything. I take care of the quarterly contributions for the remaining total 8 payments, the remaining 7. What the fellowship entails is the salary, which at the moment is pegged at $80,000. It also covers FICA, which is 7.65%, if you're unaware. Probably with all you tax folks, you do know that number. And then also what I would call the standard benefits: health, dental, vision, disability, and life insurance. So the standard benefits that the host organization provides is what the section will cover as a cost. That is a cost that is adjustable, because it does change every year. So if you start September 1st, 2023, you'll give us a number for the remaining 2023. If it changes as of January 1st, 2024, we can adjust that amount. And we can also do a true up at the end if those amounts are change over time. What the fellowship does not typically, or has never supported, is other benefits that the host organization might offer its employees, such as any kind of 401k match, or Metro, I call it Metro because I'm local here to DC, public transport support, something like that. That is not something the fellowship typically or has has ever supported. So that's the nuts and bolts. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but that's I think my spiel.
Excellent. Well, I'll just close before we take some questions by going over the timeline a little bit. So as you probably know, applications are due June 30th. Once that deadline passes early the week of July 4th, we will compile the applications that we've received and circulate those to the selection committee to review the paper applications. And then after that, we'll select several applicants. We haven't determined the exact amount yet to do Zoom interviews with, and that will happen the weeks of July 10th and July 17th, somewhere in that region. And then after that, we will do conversations with the host organizations of the finalists, the final people that we're considering, to get a little bit more of a sense of what they're envisioning this looking like, and why the fellowship would be beneficial, et cetera. And we hope to wrap that whole process up by the end of July, and make offers in August. This is all subject, hopefully it works, that timeline works out, but that's the intended timeline. Start date for the Christine Brunswick Fellows has historically been September 1st. We would love to match that, but it is not necessary. We can be somewhat flexible with timing within the fall, subject to, we would not pass up on a really great applicant just because they couldn't start on September 1st, that it needed to be a little bit later. We can have that discussion. So that's why there isn't a specific start date on the application, because we didn't want to tie everyone to that September 1st date. But if the applicant that we end up selecting and ends up accepting the offer is able to start September 1st, that would be a logical time to start.
Yeah, let me just add to that start date. The Brunswick Fellowship start date is linked that way because of academic years, when people graduate, when they take the bar examination and know their past results. So this is a different circumstance. This is somebody coming from presumably full-time work somewhere.
Right.
So they have to give notice to somebody, or they have to wrap up a practice or whatever they're going to do. So the flexibility here is great. There's nothing to get in the way of the same considerations that we have with the Brunswick Fellows. So that should be the least of anybody's concerns about when things start or don't start.
That's right. And we delayed the start date to December even for our current fellow. So she had to wrap up a practice and some other stuff as well. So, and move, which is, some people who are flexible with geography might choose to relocate, and obviously that takes time. So so that's with respect to the start date. So again, the interviews will all be on Zoom. So that should be fairly convenient for anyone. There will be, a number of people on the interview board that have great experience in this area and can determine who would be the best candidates. And then again, we'll be talking to the host organization in a separate conversation. So it's not a particularly onerous process. That's generally how it works. Let's see, did I leave anything out? One other thing, because there are folks that are interested in the Christine Brunswick Fellowship here, you should know that we select that on a sort of more aggressive timetable, given that a lot of law students are anxious to determine what they're doing after law school. So we have already selected the 2023 to 2025. I got the timing right on that, yes. Fellows for Christine Brunswick. They will start September 1st, 2023. They're great. And in that same time period, we'll start recruiting for the 2024 to 2026 Christine Brunswick Fellows. So the participant who is a 2L, it's great timing to be thinking about this, because we get a lot of 3Ls that will apply for that in the fall. And again, everything we've said about the TA fellowship is the same process for Christine Brunswick. The main difference there is, in addition to the sort of experience requirement of the applicant, is that we look for them to do some sort of project while they're during their fellowship, in addition to serving clients and learning how to be a lawyer. There's more information about that on the website. I'm also happy to talk with people who are thinking about that. And then we will do a completely separate information session process for the Christine Brunswick Fellows in the late summer, early fall. And you can actually find recordings for the ones we did last year on our website if you want to get a head start on that information. So if you're thinking about applying for next year's Christine Brunswick Fellowship, or you know anyone who would like to do that, you can get a head start by looking on the website, and we'll post the application towards the later part of the summer. And then we'll do that. Selection process happens throughout the fall and sort of wraps up around the holiday season. Okay, well, we have a few more minutes. Yes, I saw someone asked about the recording. We will post the recording on the website. Well, I'll also email it to everyone who registered for this Zoom session, because we had a bunch more people registered that are not here right now. So definitely you can catch up on anything you missed. But is there anyone who is here now who has questions that we could cover? Feel free to, you can put them in the chat, or you can go off mute and ask them either way.
There was another one in the chat from Jennifer.
Otherwise, I missed it.
Yeah, she.
Oh, can an applicant indicate they're willing to work at more than one host? We've never had this question previously. This is a new question. What do you guys think?
My immediate reaction is no.
Yeah, we've said no to the reverse. We've said no. Last year, we had several host organizations ask if they could put forward multiple fellow candidates and let us pick which one was best. And we said no to that, because we really do look for the host organization to do that vetting. You decide who would be the best person to work with you, the same way you would an employee if you were hiring someone. So definitely we would want host organizations to not put forward more than one fellow. Now, with the reverse, sounds like Karen's saying no. I don't know.
From my perspective, I wouldn't categorically rule it out, because I could envision, especially if you're talking about serving kind of rural populations, there might be a situation where you have LITCs in two different states or two different areas where, kind of there's a little bit of an overlap in that rural area where it might make sense for the two of them to partner with having a fellow focused on that spot, instead of just having one organization have the fellow there. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I could envision that being a situation.
Yeah, I could see a world where it could maybe work. I would say, since we don't have a rule on it, to contact me and we'll talk through the specific.
I would say in the future, perhaps, but this is a pilot program that we're trying to make work. And I don't think that we need to throw any additional complications into the factoring. And someone working for two different bosses who are reporting to us about how they're doing and giving instruction, I can see opportunities for a lot of confusion and kind of running amok in terms of getting things accomplished. So I would say for this pilot project, I would discourage that greatly.
Okay. I think we interpreted the question differently, because I interpreted it, and Jennifer's seemingly agreeing, that the person could say, I would either work at this host organization or I would work at this host organization, not at the same time. Like, whichever one you think is better, I'm willing to work at. Is that what you were asking, Jennifer?
Right. It seems like there are going to be way more organizations that want somebody than there are people who want to apply. We're all going to be chasing a couple of people, it seems like. How many applications did you get last time?
Well, it was a very different situation last time, because we were looking just for this one spot. But I would say for Christine Brunswick, we usually get 20. Like 10-ish around.
Right. Well, we've done the Brunswick thing and haven't won that. But that was really my question, is if there are a couple of people who want to be one, but and
they could say, I would live in Colorado or Arkansas. I think there's a place where that could maybe work. We would just have to figure out how to do it exactly. So I do think talk to me. I would call that a special circumstance. Talk to me and let's like work through how the logistics on that might work. But I wouldn't say that. I would say to Karen's interpretation, no, like you cannot work for two at the same time, probably, unless it's very.
Yeah, that's what I did understand. So yeah.
Yeah, no, the question could have gone either way. So if someone's saying I would work here or I would work here, and there isn't another applicant to cover both, I think that could potentially work. So let's talk.
I would just make the point that if it comes to that, if we have an individual who's willing to work either or kinds of things, I would really, really vet that person about what their intentions are. Because if they're going to move to Arkansas versus Colorado, what's going on in their head? What do they intend to make work? Where is their commitment? Are they just trying to get out of Dodge, or are they really trying to make a commitment and a contribution? I'm just a little skeptical, because what we've wanted with the Brunswick Fellows and have been successful at is finding people who match themselves up, so they come to us with a representation that they are compatible to make this project work. Now we have sort of a multiple choice question going on in an already potentially challenging and iffy situation in terms of relationships. And I would be concerned about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see a world in which we ask them to rank them, and then we would do a rigorous interview with the host organizations. But I wouldn't rule it out. But I agree with everything Karen said.
I mean, I think kind of the key here, hopefully that has come through all of this, is if you think that you're in any kind of I don't want to call it traditional, because this is just the second year, but kind of an unusual situation, one that doesn't fit kind of the paradigm of, okay, I'm just going to work at this single host organization and that's it. Contact Meg early, and explain what's going on, because that helps us to be able to flag issues, hopefully discuss them a little bit ahead of time and see if it's something that'll work or not. So that way you don't end up going through all of the work of putting an application together only to have it not succeed because of something that could have been flagged for you early on in the process.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we're right at the hour mark, so we did good timing wise. And again, feel free to follow up. My information's on the Taxation website if you didn't catch it in the chat, but it's megan.newman@americanbar.org. Megan with no silent letters. All right. Well, thank you so much, and good luck.
Bye all. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.